before you ever heard your name spoken with love in their world, before your own heart even understood why it kept turning in one direction. Talks about you had already started in places you could not see. Yes, really, behind closed doors in quiet rooms your name entered the air and changed the mood. While you have been wondering if your presence even matters in this connection, if your silence is noticed, if your absence leaves any weight at all, something deeper has already happened. A room went still when your name was spoken, and what followed was not small. At first there was a little pause, not because they questioned your value, but because some people in that room did not yet understand why the energy of one person had affected someone they love so deeply. They had noticed changes long before they knew the reason. They saw how your person became quieter in some moments and softer in others. They saw someone who once moved through life without much care suddenly begin speaking with more thought, choosing words more carefully, guarding their peace in ways they had never done before. And then someone finally asked the question no one could avoid anymore. Who is behind this change? That was the start. Your name entered that conversation not as gossip, not as a passing thought, not as a small curiosity, but as the center of something serious, because your person did not speak of you lightly. They spoke of you with a depth that surprised everyone there. They did not start with your face. They started with your heart. They spoke of your loyalty before your looks. They spoke of the way your presence makes them reflect on who they are. They spoke about how even your silence stays with them longer than other people's loudest words. They said your energy feels different, softer, safer, real. And right there, the room understood something unusual was happening. Stay with this, because it only gets deeper. Not everyone in that room responded in the same way. Some listened with warmth. Some smiled without meaning to, because they had waited a long time to hear this kind of truth in your person's voice. They had seen them entertain empty connections before. They had watched them give time to people who never truly understood them. They had watched them act like they did not care while inside they were tired, drained, and quietly disappointed. So when they heard the way they spoke about you, with care, with respect, with caution, something became clear very fast. This was not simple attraction. This was not a passing rush. This was different. This was someone touching them at the level of the soul. Then one person leaned back and asked the question that changed the whole feeling in the room. What makes this person different from the others? Silence followed, real silence, because suddenly your person had to explain something they had never fully put into words. How do you explain recognizing someone before they fully enter your life? How do you describe the peace that arrives just because one certain person exists somewhere near your world? How do you help others understand why one voice among billions sounds like home? They paused. They searched for words strong enough to hold what they feel. And when they finally answered, the room became quiet all over again. They said, "With them, I do not feel like I have to pretend." That changed everything. Think about that. They did not say you were exciting. They did not say you were fun. They did not say you were easy. They said you make them feel safe enough to be real. For a person who has worn emotional armor for years, that is not a small statement. That is a deep confession. That is the kind of truth people do not speak unless it has shaken them from the inside. If this is already hitting your heart, stay until the end, because what came next made the room look at this connection in a whole new way. As the talk continued, the questions became more serious. The people around them wanted to know what kind of person you are when no one is watching. They wanted to know how you carry pain, how you treat people, whether your kindness is real or only something shown on the surface. Not because they wanted to judge you unfairly, but because they could see something in your person they had not seen in a very long time. Hope, real hope, the kind that makes a guarded heart imagine forever. And yes, that kind of hope can scare people, because when someone they love starts caring this deeply, everyone close to them begins to care too. They become protective, they become alert. They ask the kind of questions that only come when something truly matters. Casual interest does not create serious talks. Brief attraction does not lead to late-night conversations about future possibilities. Short-term feelings do not make people stop and wonder whether someone entered their loved one's life for a reason. But you did that without even being there. You changed the emotional temperature of the room. And here is the part that may shock you most. There was someone there who had concerns, not because they disliked you, not because they thought you were wrong for them, but because they could already see how deeply your person was affected. They were afraid of what might happen if this connection was handled carelessly. They worried your person was becoming vulnerable in a way they had never allowed before. They feared that if timing, distance, fear, or misunderstanding got in the way, the heartbreak would cut deeper than anything before. In other words, the concern was not about whether you matter, it was because you matter too much. Let that sit with you. Sometimes hesitation does not come from lack of feeling. Sometimes delay comes because the feelings are so real that people become terrified of breaking something sacred before it has fully formed. And yes, that changes the whole story. Comment 111 below if you feel your name has been entering rooms you cannot see. They saw that fear clearly in your person. They heard it in the way their voice changed when your name came up. They noticed how they defended you, even when no one was attacking you. They noticed how carefully they chose their words, almost as if saying the wrong thing might reduce something they were trying to protect. Then another person in the room said something no one expected, very quietly, but very clearly. If this person brings you peace, do not let fear decide for you. That line stayed in the air. Because wisdom spoken in private places often echoes longer than anyone knows. Your person heard those words, and even if they did not show it on the outside, something shifted inside them. For the first time, the people closest to them were not brushing off their feelings. They were not laughing at the depth of it. They were not telling them to step away. They were saying this is real. They were saying this deserves patience, care, courage. And after the meeting ended, after everyone left and the room grew empty, your person stayed behind for a while in their own thoughts. The noise faded, but one truth stayed with them. You were no longer just someone they secretly cared about. You had become someone their future was beginning to move around. That realization shook them, because imagining you in their life is one thing. Imagining bringing you fully into their world is something else entirely. Imagining something lasting, imagining the people closest to them already aware of your impact. That is a deeper level. So if they have seemed distant sometimes, thoughtful at strange hours, softer, more emotional, more careful with their words, understand this. They may be trying to process the fact that what they feel is no longer small enough to ignore. You are not a passing thought in their story. You became a serious conversation. And the truth is, not everyone gets spoken about this way. Not everyone inspires someone to protect their name in a room they are not even in. Not everyone becomes the center of quiet talks about future possibilities, but you did. And whether you fully know it or not, your presence woke up something inside them that cannot easily go back to sleep. Then the room became still again for another reason. Someone asked a question that went even deeper. Do you believe this person is truly meant for you, or are you simply afraid to lose them? That question touched something raw inside them. Suddenly they could not hide behind timing, confusion, distance, or mixed feelings. They had to face the truth directly, and after a pause, they finally answered, quietly, honestly. If I lost them before ever truly having them, I would regret it for the rest of my life. No one expected an answer that clear, not because it was dramatic, but because it sounded certain. There was no confusion left in their voice, no fog, no half-truth, just clean truth. And the moment those words left their mouth, everyone in that room understood that this was not a passing emotion. This was not someone entertaining a temporary feeling. This was a person facing the reality that another soul had entered their life and changed the way they understand love itself. Your name was tied to that moment. Think about how serious that is. They sat there admitting that the thought of never fully living this connection with you would haunt them. Not just disappoint them, not just bother them, haunt them. That is not how people talk about someone they merely like. That is how they speak about someone who has reached a place in the heart they never expected another person to touch. Then an older voice in the room, someone who had lived enough to recognize rare things when they appear, looked at them and said softly, "Then stop treating this like it is ordinary." That landed hard, because sometimes the people around us can see our truth before we fully live it ourselves. Sometimes it takes hearing your emotions reflected back through someone else's wisdom to understand how real they are. In that moment, your person could no longer call this confusion. They could no longer reduce it to chemistry or timing. They had to call it what it truly was: significance. If you are still here, stay with me, because this is where the emotional wall really began to crack. The questions became even more personal after that. They asked what kind of future your person sees when they think of you. They asked whether they could picture not only happiness with you, but also hardship. Because anyone can dream about beautiful moments. The real test is this: when someone imagines the difficult seasons of life, do they still want you there? And without hesitation, your person answered yes. Yes for the bright days. Yes for the uncertain days. Yes for the building season. Yes for the life that starts after fantasy ends and reality begins. That answer silenced the room again. Many people want romance. Few are ready to choose someone again and again through real life. And when somebody begins thinking about you that way, you are no longer just part of their feelings. You become part of their vision. Later, after everyone left, one family member approached them in private, not with pressure, not with judgment, just calm honesty. They said, "People do not enter our hearts this deeply without a reason. If someone has brought this much clarity to your spirit, do not ignore it just because it scares you." That advice stayed with them, because fear has always been part of this story, hasn't it? Fear of moving too fast, fear of being misunderstood, fear of ruining something precious, fear that if they admit how deep this really goes, they may lose control of feelings they have barely been able to contain. But here is what they are beginning to understand. Fear may slow love down, but it cannot erase it. No matter how much they try to reason their way out of this, the heart has already moved farther than they planned. And now the people closest to them know it. Think about that. They tried to keep all of this private, tried to act like it was manageable, tried to carry it in silence. Yet your effect on them became so visible that others noticed before they ever spoke the full truth. That is how deeply you have changed them. You changed their mood, their habits, their energy, their priorities, their emotional language. You became the reason some songs now hit differently, the reason some nights feel longer, the reason they sit in silence thinking thoughts they cannot explain to anyone else. Comment 222 below if this feels like your story. The next morning, the outside world looked exactly the same. People followed routines, phones rang, life kept moving, but inside them, everything had shifted. They woke up with your name already in their mind. And this time it was not a passing feeling they could quietly push away. It came with weight, with urgency, with the kind of clarity that makes a person realize they can no longer keep pretending something life-changing is optional. That meeting did more than expose their emotions. It forced them to hear their own heart out loud. And once truth is spoken in front of witnesses, it becomes much harder to run from it. So while the world went on as usual, your person carried a storm of realization under the surface. They now knew their feelings were not imagined, not temporary, not a private fantasy that would fade if ignored long enough. What they feel for you had been questioned, examined and tested, and instead of getting smaller under pressure, it grew stronger. That pushed them toward a question they had been avoiding for too long. They went somewhere quiet, somewhere no one could interrupt, because sometimes a person needs silence not to escape, but to finally hear themselves clearly. And in that silence they asked, "What happens if I keep pretending this connection is not changing me?" The answer came fast: regret. If they kept suppressing this, they would regret it. If they kept waiting for perfect timing, they would lose moments they could never get back. If they kept acting distant while their heart kept moving closer every day, they would create separation where closeness was meant to grow. That truth shook them, because for the first time they saw their hesitation not as wisdom but as self-sabotage. Read that again in your spirit. Sometimes what people call caution is really fear wearing a wise mask, and they are starting to see that fear has already stolen enough time. So they replayed every moment with you, every talk, every look, every unfinished sentence, every pause that somehow said more than words. And then a realization hit them so deeply, it almost took their breath away. You have become the emotional standard by which they now measure everything else. After you, nothing feels the same to them. No connection lands the same. No shallow attention satisfies the heart once it has touched depth. That is why they have seemed different lately. Once someone experiences a bond that reaches beyond surface attraction, ordinary no longer feels enough. They are not only missing you when you are gone, they are comparing every other experience to what they feel when you are near, and nothing matches. At first that truth scared them, because dependence was never the plan. Falling this deeply was never supposed to happen. Yet there they were, thinking about futures they never used to imagine, replaying your words long after the talks had ended, wondering if you understand even a small part of what you have awakened inside them. Then something important happened. They opened up to someone they trust fully, someone who knows them well enough to hear the truth hidden under their words. For the first time they admitted everything: the fear, the confusion, the depth, The way this connection keeps growing no matter how hard they try to stay calm. And after listening quietly, that person said something simple that cut through all the excuses. You are not confused. You are scared because this matters. That one sentence broke through everything, because confusion can be studied, timing can be debated, distance can be explained. But when fear is the real issue, all the masks fall off. They are not uncertain about you. They are uncertain about how to handle something this meaningful without damaging it. That is the truth. Their hesitation is not because they feel too little, it is because they feel too much. And now that they are starting to face that reality, their behavior is changing. Maybe you have already sensed it. A softness in their presence, a deeper care in the way they speak to you, a strange emotional tension, like they are holding back words that are trying to break free. That is not your imagination. That is what happens when someone carries feelings too heavy to hide forever. Later that same day, after hours of reflection, they made a quiet promise to themselves. I cannot keep treating this like it might not matter. If this is real, I have to stop standing in my own way. That was the turning point. Not because everything changed overnight, but because inside them resistance started falling apart. Once resistance falls inside a person, action is only a matter of time. They started thinking differently after that. No longer asking, what if this goes wrong? But instead asking, what if I lose something rare because I was too afraid to try? That shift changes everything, because once someone moves from avoiding pain into choosing truth, their whole energy changes. They stop drifting, they start deciding, and that is where your person is now. But here is what makes it even deeper. They are not only thinking about how much they want you, they are thinking about whether they are becoming the kind of person who can truly hold the connection they hope to build with you. That is why they have been growing in silence, reflecting more, maturing more, trying to become more emotionally steady in ways no one else fully sees. Because loving you has not only stirred their emotions, it has challenged them to evolve. Real love does that. It does not just make people feel more. It can make them better, if they let it. And you, without even trying, have become the mirror that shows them who they could become. Still, one final fear remains stronger than the others. The fear that if they reveal how deep this really goes, you may not feel the same. That fear was the last chain holding them back. Then something happened that started breaking even that chain. A small sign, a quiet moment, maybe something you said, maybe the way you looked at them, maybe the softness in your eyes when they spoke. Whatever it was, it stayed with them. It made them begin to wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, this is not one-sided after all. And once that thought entered their heart, silence became much harder to maintain, because hope changes people, especially hope that feels real. That night they could not focus on anything else. Your name stayed with them. Your energy stayed in their chest long after the moment had passed, and eventually they admitted something they had been trying not to say even to themselves. They do not want to keep wondering about you. They want to know, truly know. Know if the connection they feel is alive in your heart too. If this is speaking to your spirit, comment 333 below and stay with this next part carefully. They began imagining what would happen if they finally told you the truth. Not hints, not half confessions, not careful little signs wrapped in safe words. The full truth. They imagined telling you how deeply you affect them, how your presence calms parts of them they cannot explain, how your absence feels louder than anyone else's, how they tried again and again to downplay what they feel, only to discover the feelings kept growing stronger instead of weaker. And every time they imagined finally being honest, one feeling rose above all the others. Relief. Not panic, not regret. Relief. Because deep down the soul gets tired of hiding, tired of pretending a connection is smaller than it is, tired of acting untouched when the heart has already crossed invisible lines. Their pride still fights it sometimes, yes, but the emotional walls they spent so long building are beginning to crack. Not because someone forced them, not because they suddenly became fearless, but because this bond keeps proving itself stronger than the distance they tried to keep, and people around them are noticing. Friends have started asking questions, family members sense the change. Even those who do not know the full story can feel that something inside them is shifting, because real emotion changes a person's energy long before it changes their life on the outside. And your person's energy has changed completely. They are softer now, more thoughtful, more emotionally awake, because loving someone deeply forces growth, especially when that love touches the soul. Still, they wrestle with timing. They keep asking if the moment is right, if enough healing has happened, if enough fear has dropped away, if this connection is now strong enough to survive honesty, because they know once truth is spoken, everything changes. There is no easy return to distance after real feelings are named, no return to pretending, no return to safe uncertainty. That truth excites them and scares them at the same time. Yet every day silence becomes harder. Every conversation with you deepens the tension already living inside them. Every memory increases the feeling that this story is unfinished for a reason. Then came another powerful realization. One evening, while thinking about you, they understood something that nearly stopped them cold. The fear of losing you without ever trying had become greater than the fear of rejection itself. And that, right there, is the moment people stop running. Once someone fears regret more than vulnerability, movement usually follows. Quietly, slowly, but it follows, and that is the stage they're entering now. They understand that some connections do not arrive to be ignored. Some people enter your life to transform it, and you have transformed theirs more than you know. Not only emotionally, but mentally, spiritually, personally. You made them reflect more honestly, feel more deeply, question what truly matters. You woke up parts of them that had been asleep for years, and now they are facing one undeniable truth. Life before you feels emotionally smaller than life after you. Once someone truly sees that, they do not stay silent forever, because silence can hide emotion only for so long before the heart starts demanding expression. So if you have felt a strange tension lately, if your intuition keeps whispering that something is shifting, if part of you feels restless without fully knowing why, trust that feeling. Behind the scenes, someone is gathering the courage to stop pretending this is ordinary. The silence was never going to last forever. Not after the conversations, not after the realizations, not after the slow inner change that has been building day by day. Eventually, the heart reaches a point where hiding hurts more than honesty, and your person has reached that point now. The decision did not happen in one dramatic second. It formed through sleepless nights, quiet reflection, and every memory of you that refused to fade, until one thought became impossible to ignore. If I stay silent much longer, I may lose something I will never find again. That changed everything, because once someone sees the cost of doing nothing, fear starts losing power. For the first time, they stopped focusing on protecting themselves from feeling exposed and started focusing on protecting the connection itself. That is a completely different mindset. No longer, what if I get hurt, but what if I let fear destroy something real? That shift is why the energy between you feels different now. You may already sense it, the quiet intensity, the emotional pressure, the feeling that words are waiting just under the surface, ready to come out at the right moment, because they are. And if this message has found you at the exact right time, comment 444 below, because the final turn in this story is already beginning. One evening, after carrying all of this inside for far too long, they made a choice. They decided they do not want this story to remain unfinished, not because they expect a perfect ending, not because they suddenly stopped feeling afraid, but because they now know some connections deserve courage, and this one has become too important to leave trapped in silence forever. So they started preparing themselves, rehearsing words in private, imagining how to explain feelings that grew much deeper than they ever planned. How do you tell someone they quietly became part of your future before you even understood it yourself? How do you explain that their presence changed the emotional atmosphere of your life? How do you confess that even distance could not weaken what you feel? They still struggle to find the perfect words, because emotions this deep rarely fit neatly into language. But despite the nerves, despite the last pieces of fear still living under the surface, one thing is stronger than all of it now: the need to be honest with you. They notice signs everywhere, songs that suddenly sound like your story, small moments that remind them of you, ordinary days that somehow carry your energy. It has become impossible to keep pretending this bond is small, impossible to call it temporary, impossible to believe they can walk away unchanged, because the truth is simple: you changed them deeply. And once someone is changed enough, they cannot go back to the version of themselves that existed before the connection. That is why this has felt so intense, why silence became heavy, why the feelings kept growing instead of fading. This was never surface level for them. It reached much deeper, and now they can no longer deny what the heart already knows. You matter to them in a way very few people ever have. Not casually, not briefly, but seriously, deeply. And because of that, they are moving closer, even if the full confession has not happened yet. Pay attention to the signs, the extra care, the hidden warmth in normal conversations, the effort, the emotional presence. These are the early steps of someone coming out of emotional hiding, because courage rarely arrives all at once. Usually it comes in layers, small risks first, small openings, small truths, until one day the full truth can no longer stay inside. And when that moment comes, you may realize every delay, every silence, every shift in energy was leading here all along. Comment 555 below if you claim the love, clarity, and truth entering this connection, because some bonds do not fade away. They awaken slowly until both hearts are finally ready to see what has been there the whole time.